In 1925, this Javanese man had a spiritual experience which was to shape not only his own life, but also the lives of many thousands of other people. The experience was the foundation of the spiritual movement known as Subud. His name was Muhammad Subuh Sumo Hadiwijoyo, and in later years he would usually be known as Bapak, an Indonesian term of affection and respect, meaning father. He was born at dawn on June the 22nd, 1901, in Kedung Jati, a remote village in the mountains of central Java. The moment of his birth was auspicious, coinciding with the anniversary of the birth of the Prophet Muhammad. On his father's side, he could trace his ancestry back to the Javanese royal houses of Solo and Mataram, and on his mother's side, he was descended from Sunan Kalijogo, one of the 9 saints credited with spreading Islam in Indonesia. Situated on a winding river, Kedung Jati even today has a timeless quality. Bapak was first given the name Sukarno, but fell ill. Then a mysterious stranger appeared who suggested the baby's name should be changed to Subuh, meaning dawn, and he recovered his health.
Papa later found out, interestingly enough, that born in the same month of June 1901 was someone else whose name originally that he was originally given had the meaning of dawn, but that this was changed later to Sukarno. And it was this man who became the president of Indonesia. So it is very odd because Bapak and Sukarno were born at the same time. And also both were descended from Sunan Kalijogo. Sukarno also was descended from Sunan Kalijogo. And it seems that with the name Sukarno, he also became the president of Indonesia, whereas Bapak became just an ordinary man. And
Soon after his birth, Bapak was taken to live next door with his great uncle and aunt. He spent his childhood with them and referred to them as his grandparents, which is common in Indonesia. Bapak's childhood was in most respects ordinary, but there were some signs of unusual gifts and sensitivities. Taken to a wedding by his grandmother, he predicted the union would not last, which proved to be true. He found he could not swear or lie. If he saw people quarrelling or fighting, he experienced pain in his body. Bapak was at first tutored by a neighbour's son, but was eventually able to attend a private school in the nearby town of Ambarawa, travelling back and forth each day by train. At school, he was sometimes in trouble because he could not say or write things he knew to be untrue. He could not say, for example, that the Javanese were inferior to the Europeans, as was commonly taught in the Dutch schools at that time. At the age of 15 in Ambarawa, he had a powerful and prophetic experience. In the middle of the night, he saw a tall, older man approach him. This man said, "You will work until you are 32 years old, but God will call you back when you are 32. After that, your name will become respected and revered by many people because of God's love for you." Then the man disappeared. Bapak interpreted the experience to mean he would die at 32. He resolved to work hard in the time remaining to him to support his family. He first found work with the railways. but then, after a time living in Surabaya, he took a job in the bookkeeping department of the city of Semarang. He was developing a strong interest in the spiritual life and would often go with a group of friends to visit teachers in the Sufi traditions of Islamic mysticism. To his frustration, these teachers would usually decline to take him on as a pupil, telling him that eventually he would find his own path to spiritual knowledge. After work, Bapak would study bookkeeping until late at night, and then go for a walk to clear his head, often passing the hospital which was being built at that time. On one such night in 1925, he received the experience which was to transform his life. As he was passing the hospital construction site, his surroundings were suddenly illuminated as bright as day. He looked up and saw a bright light like the sun, which descended and entered his head. He felt a violent shock, as though he was going to have a heart attack. He hurried home and lay down and prepared himself for death. But then he saw his whole body was filled with light. He was moved to get up and say his Islamic prayers by a power beyond himself.
All this happened without Bapa's intention. It was as it were a spontaneous movement. Bapa could just feel his body walking. And Bapa found himself walking to the room where he normally did his studying, and also where he normally said his prayers. And maybe because Bapa is a Muslim, Bapa then felt himself moved through the movements of the Muslim prayer, starting with the Takbiratul Ihram, the Allahu Akbar, and then all the movements of the prayer and of 2 rakats until Bapa finished his prayer. Bapa felt himself being lifted up, stood up, and walked back again to his bed, and lay down on his bed and fell fast asleep. So all this happened without Bapa's intention.
Now began a period which Bapak referred to as the 1,000 Nights, when spiritual experiences came to him spontaneously every night for about 3 years. On one occasion, for example, a man in Arabic costume approached him and opened up his chest with the point of a spear. It was very painful. The man withdrew a clot of blood from Bapak's chest on the point of the spear. He threw the clot away and then took a shining object about the size of a duck's egg, placed it in Bapak's chest, and closed the wound with his hand. The man then disappeared. Bapak's chest felt clear and wide, his inner feeling sensitive, clean, and calm. His faith in the presence of God stronger. On another occasion, a book about the size of an atlas fell into his lap. The book showed people of many races and nationalities praying, weeping, and calling out to God for forgiveness. It was a foretelling of how the Latihan would spread around the world. In 1926, Bapak married Ruminda, the daughter of a religious leader in the town of Pemetan. They settled in Semarang, and over the next few years had 5 children. Then, in 1932, when Bapak was 32 years old according to the Islamic calendar, the prediction that he would be called back to Almighty God, that had been made when he was 15, came true. The experience began in this room in his house in Semarang around 9:30 in the evening. Bapak experienced himself being freed from the confines of this earth, like a jewel being released from its setting and sped through the sky at unimaginable speed. Throughout this journey, he maintained a clear awareness and an alive feeling, and constantly uttered Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. God is Almighty, God is Almighty. He sped through the solar system and was able to pass unscathed through the sun and found himself in the vastness of space. He travelled across a huge expanse at great speed until he saw 7 mountain-like cones of light stacked one above the other. He travelled up through the cones until in the 7th cone he had no direction and no purpose other than to say, Allah, Allah, Allah. Then he felt a key penetrate the palm of his hand. Then he was moved with extraordinary speed. As he entered the sphere of the earth, he went more slowly. He saw lights below, which he at first thought were stars, but then understood to be the lights of Semarang. Finally, he re-entered his house. His mother told him that she too had had an experience of ascension during the night, a confirmation of his own experience. Bapak now found that he could share what he had received with others. It was a contact with the power of God, which everyone could experience in their own unique, spontaneous way. Bapak was also receiving premonitions about the future, that there would be a Second World War, after which Indonesia would become independent, and that Bapak himself would travel all around the world. He had given up his employment and now gave all his time to looking after the needs of those who had chosen to do the Latihan. These were difficult times when the family often did not know where its next meal was coming from. When their 3rd son died as a young child, Ruminda, depressed over the loss, returned to live with her parents. Bapak joined her there, but she became ill and died in 1937, and she is buried in the cemetery at Pamatan. After several years, Bapak met Siti Sumari, a widow who had 2 children of her own. She and Bapak were married on November the 15th, 1941. Popularly known as Ibu, which means mother in Indonesian, she would be Bapak's faithful companion in his work for the development of Subud. In the troubled times following the Second World War, Bapak and his family moved to Yogyakarta, the historic city in central Java, which had been the centre of Indonesia's struggle for independence against the Dutch. A Subud group formed here, and in 1947, Subud was officially registered as a spiritual movement with the Indonesian government. Bapak's receiving that Indonesia would gain its independence came true. He had also told his followers that Subud would eventually spread all around the world, aided by a man who had come from the West. In 1952, a young man named Hussein Rofe came to live in Yogyakarta. He was a linguist, fluent in many languages, and a journalist who had come to the East on a spiritual search. In Jogja, he met Bapak.
I was in a new country. I was in a strange country. I was interested in the idea. Nobody else had ever offered to initiate me into anything. And I took the attitude that if I didn't find anything else, I should at least be able to look into some people like this and write an article for overseas on the spiritual beliefs of the Javanese. He told me that it was important I should believe in myself and not believe in him, and that this could possibly give me what I was looking for, and that if I wished to be accepted, I had only to come back when they were having an evening meeting about 2 or 3 evenings later, and we could start immediately with my first initiation to Subud. he didn't explain what they did. He did tell me how that it was something to do with the grace of God, that I could sort of be shown how to open myself to this, and that the teacher would be God. It would be from within. But it was in those days that he used to say, or maybe not very long afterwards, if somebody who has never seen a mango asks me what it is, I cannot tell him in such a way that he will really understand. This is not possible. What I do instead is I pop a piece of mango in his mouth, and when he says, "What is this?" I begin to comment, "This is called a mango, its nature is sweet, it is this, that, and the other." And so, I mean, that was very much part of his whole attitude. I was walking back a couple of miles, I didn't come on my bicycle, and it was a moonlit night, and as I walked back across this very quiet and sleepy town, there were all sorts of ideas bombarding me in the form of thought. And these ideas definitely took a form, as I have already written years ago, that I had not discovered the kind of thing that was available in every kampong. I had discovered something that might be of significance to the whole world, that I was likely to have some connection with this becoming known in the outside world.
As a result of some articles published abroad, Rofe was invited to go to a religious conference in Japan, where he formed a Subud group. After about 6 months in Japan, he moved to Hong Kong. He soon formed a Subud group here too, and then an article he wrote was read by Meredith Starr, an English naturopath and spiritual seeker living on Cyprus. Starr and his wife invited Bapak to come to Cyprus, but Bapak sent Rofe in his place. Bapak had now moved from Yogyakarta to Jakarta, Indonesia's capital. He is seen here in 1955 in the first movie footage taken of him on a visit with family and friends to the mountain resort of Puncak. In May 1957, Bapak, accompanied by Ibu and 2 young assistants, went to England. News of Subud had spread amongst the followers of the Russian sage Gurdjieff, who had died in 1949. After staying briefly in London, Bapak moved to a property, Coombe Springs, south of London. The house belonged to the Institute for the Comparative Study of History, Philosophy and the Sciences, which was devoted to the study of Gurdjieff's methods. The director was John Bennett, who had already been practicing the Latihan for some months.
Bennett told us this is what they'd been waiting for, that Gurdjieff had spoken of about 10 years previously before he died. And now it had come, and so anybody who was interested had to put their name down and just wait. And we had absolutely no idea what was going to happen. We weren't told anything. We knew nothing. So then we waited. Used to get there at 6 o'clock in the evening, 3 days a week, and we just wait. And we'd sometimes wait till 11 o'clock before we got in. There were about 500 people waiting with their names down. And eventually we got in, of course. And first thing I heard, we were told, of course, to take off our shoes and the usual thing, the jewellery, and that seemed a bit weird, but okay. And then we went in, and there were about 50 of us. And Ibu said, there are many religions, but there's only one God. Begin. And the first thing I thought, my God, it's about God. I'm going to get out of here, because I was an atheist. I wanted nothing to do with God or anything like that. So I thought, I'm going, but my arm suddenly shot in the air, and I thought, what's she doing to me? And I thought, oh, they're hypnotizing us. So I opened my eyes and then saw that everybody was doing something different. I thought, well, 2 women can't hypnotize 50 people, so I think I'll stay. So I went on, and then gradually things were revealed, but it took a long time.
Subud grew quickly, particularly amongst those who had been following the Gurdjieff work. Some 400 people were opened in the first 2 months after Bapak came to Coombe Springs, and by the end of the year that number had doubled. Fortuitously, a Gurdjieff seminar had been arranged for that summer, attended by people from all around the world. And when they returned to their own countries, they brought news of Subud with them. Subud spread swiftly within the ready-made network of Gurdjieff followers. Subud also attracted the attention of the media and the general public when it was reported in November 1957 that the film star Eva Bartok had experienced what appeared to be a miraculous healing as a result of following the Latihan. The episode spread knowledge of Subud beyond the Gurdjieff circles and attracted large numbers of people to the movement. Although Bapak continued to develop and refine his message over the next 30 years, many of the essential features of Subud as we know it today were already established when Bapak came to the West. The name he gave to the Subud experience was the Latihan, short for Latihan Kejuan, an Indonesian phrase meaning spiritual exercise. He stressed that the Latihan was for our spiritual life, a receiving direct from Almighty God. We ourselves can do nothing to assist the process. We have only to surrender to the power of God.
Pada waktu dibuka dan seterusnya. Kenyataannya, saudara sekalian, saudara sebelum dibuka atau menerima getaran hidup yang ada dalam diri saudara sekalian, rasanya apakah nanti yang terjadi dalam latihan, dan apa pula yang terjadi dalam pembukaan itu. Dan akhirnya sudah sekarang dibuka. Kalau saudara beruntung, terasa getaran. Adalah getaran hidup di dalam hidup saudara. Pada saat itu, saudara sekalian, saudara merasa aneh. Saudara merasa heran. Mengapa ada getaran di dalam diriku yang sebelumnya aku tidak tahu, tidak mengira, tidak mengerti. Inilah saudara sekalian yang biasa omongan orang atau kata Nabi sendiri juga, sesuatu yang dikatakan anugerah, sesuatu yang dikatakan wahyu, sesuatu yang dikatakan pemberian Tuhan kepada manusia di luar akal pikiran manusia. Oleh karena itu maka latihan kejiwaan Subud ini Bapak selalu katakan adalah penerimaan, bukan sesuatu pelajaran. Demikianlah saudara sekalian, maka sukar bagi manusia atau sukar bagi saudara sekalian untuk mengubah itu untuk mengertikan apa latihan kejiwaan Subud itu. Karena tidak dapat dipikirkan, tahu-tahu ada, tahu-tahu jadi. Dan karena demikian itulah maka syaratnya untuk dapat menerima, syaratnya untuk dapat merasakan bagaimana pemberian Tuhan kepada saudara sekalian atau bagaimana pemberian Tuhan kepada manusia, hanya sabar, tawakal, dan ikhlas. Karena sabar, tawakal, dan ikhlas itu berarti melumpuhkan pengaruh nafsu, melumpuhkan pengaruh kehendak saudara sekalian yang ingin tahu, ingin mengerti itu, yang bersarang dalam hati dan akal pikiran. Ini selalu Bapak katakan, bahwa nafsu itu, saudara sekalian, tetap ada. Dan itu memang menjadi milik manusia. Jadi kalau manusia tidak memiliki nafsu, tidak akan ada atau memiliki semangat. Semangat hidup itu tidak ada. Hidup di dunia. Ya, isi hidup tentunya seperti bekerja dan lain-lainnya. Jadi nafsu itu penting bagi hidup saudara sekalian di dunia. Dan nafsu itu bersarang dalam hati dan akal pikiran saudara sekalian. Karena itu maka sukar sekali untuk melenyapkan nafsu itu dari diri saudara sekalian kalau saudara tidak meninggal dunia, kalau tidak mati.
He frequently stated that Subud itself was not a religion, that it had no dogma or theory, and was therefore open to members of all religions. And in fact, Subud does include people of all religions in its membership. He said that Subud would not spread by preaching or propaganda, but by the example of Subud members' lives. He urged those in Subud to be active in the world. He particularly stressed the importance of enterprises as a way not only of providing for Subud's financial needs, but also for developing talent and self-reliance. He also encouraged members to set up social projects, such as schools, hospitals, and old people's homes, saying that charity is an essential characteristic of a human being. He also said that Subud would enable people to discover a truly human culture, and cultural activities were present as part of Subud life from the earliest days. He established a structure for the Subud organization. On the one hand, he appointed helpers, people designated to look after the spiritual side of things, such as the opening of new members. On the other side, there was a committee to look after worldly matters. This parallel structure would be duplicated at every level, from the local group to the international organization. He also introduced testing as a way of decision-making. In testing, a question or problem is surrendered to God and an answer or indication received through the Latihan. In Subud, testing became a way of dealing with issues both for individuals and the organization. One effect of the publicity given to the healing of Eva Bartok was that many people were now attracted to Subud for this reason, even though Bapak always stressed the purpose of Subud was not physical healing. A pioneer Subud health project, Brookhurst Grange, was set up to meet the needs of the many people who were now attracted to Subud in hopes of physical healing. In 1959, after visiting a number of other countries, Bapak returned to England, where the first International Subud World Congress was held at Coombe Springs in August. These World Congresses, usually held every 4 years, have been important events in the life of Subud. A festive coming together of people of many different races and nationalities, at which important decisions about the future directions of Subud are determined by delegates from the various countries. More than 450 delegates and other members attended the first Congress, and 35 countries were represented. Bapak gave several talks and answered questions. Bapak always stressed that his talks were not teachings, but rather explanations, helping people to understand the process of the Latihan, as in this explanation about the derivation of the word Subud from the Sanskrit terms Susila, Budi, and Dharma.
Demikian sesuai dengan
and the meaning
nama
of the word Sushila is that the nature of man is entirely filled and permeated with the power and the force that comes from God. The meaning of Buddhi is that there is deep within man powers that are of a higher nature than his ordinary self, and that through these powers man can receive, or spirits, he can receive guidance in everything that is necessary for him. And the word dharma means that state of complete submission to the will of God in everything, so that man places his desire to do the will of God higher than any other desire that he may have in this world. And also implied in the word dharma is also that man loves God, and that man's love of God is greater than his love of anything else that exists in this world. And this in that way, that man fulfills what was taught and proclaimed by the prophets, that man should love God more than everything else that exists.
By the 1960s, Subud was well established in many countries around the world. Bapak travelled constantly, attending to the needs of Subud members and to the development of the Subud organisation. He made 20 round-the-world journeys between 1957 and 1987. It has been estimated the total distance of his journeys would be equivalent to travelling to the moon and back.
One didn't feel one was travelling. One felt like there was one was in a bubble with Bapak. And the world was whizzing past us, you know. I mean, planes would come and pick us up and put us down, and then people would come and take us to the hall, and Bapak would give a talk, and then all these things kept whizzing past us, and we were just together in this bubble. It was really extraordinary. And it was it was like being in a spaceship somehow.
This fragment of videotape is an example of the testing he used to demonstrate.
Ini apa artinya? Pertama, Allah, Laila lupun muni lemoko. Alil ulil. La. Saya berhenti dulu. Lama-lama, Allah.
And that was what Bapak just demonstrated, that when he first received the Latihan, he also received words and sounds which didn't make sense, or apparently didn't make any sense at all. And Bapak was wondering what is the meaning of this. Of course, the sounds don't have any meaning. But then Bapak changed to somewhat later, when Bapak was able to receive complete sounds, like Allahu Akbar. And Bapak showed how he first received that. And when he had received that, then he asked, well, what is the meaning of this Allahu Akbar that he is receiving? And then he received the movement which showed what is the meaning of those words, as Bapak indicated. In other words, he received that Allah which envelops everything and envelops the whole universe, and also Bapak himself.
The Second World Congress was held in 1963 at Briarcliff in New York State. Virendra Vatachi, an internationally respected Sri Lankan journalist who was later to play an important role with UNICEF, became chairman of the World Subud Association, a position he was to continue to hold, sometimes reluctantly, until his death in 1993.
I have always rebelled against chairmen and committees, and now I find myself at the receiving end.
Bapak was encouraging Subud members to set up local groups, ideally in Subud houses owned by the membership. Many groups did obtain their own Subud houses, and often these became lively centres of communal activity, expressive of the particular culture of their nation or locality. The Subud group in Wolfsburg in Germany created a particularly lively centre of activity in an old forest house. Groups are affiliated into national organisations, and these national organisations become part of zonal and international structures.
Won't you stand up and walk? We've a long way to go, and the highway is here.
By 1960, with the rapid growth of Subud all around the world, Bapak looked for land in Jakarta where he could establish a Subud centre. Many Subud members from other countries were coming to Jakarta to visit Bapak, and there was also a need for a secretariat to respond to the many letters which were coming in seeking advice. In 1960, Bapak found several hectares of land to the south of the city, in a suburb known as Jelandak, which at that time was still an area of paddy fields and small farms. Over the next 10 years, the compound was developed. A guest house was built, and then a house for Bapak. Indonesian and expatriate Subud members built homes, and a multicultural community was established. At certain times, such as the fast of Ramadan, hundreds of visitors from overseas would come to the compound. Many international meetings of the Subud organisation were also held in Wisma Subud. Ibu had been Bapak's faithful companion throughout the years of the development of Subud, and many Subud members, especially women, had formed close relationships with her and valued her advice. But by 1971, her health began to fail, and she died on Friday, February the 12th, in Jelandak, a few days before her 64th birthday. The Fourth World Congress was held in Jelandak in August 1971. A magnificent new Latihan hall was built, a space capable of seating 2,000 people, spanned by a great dome. About 2,000 members from 80 countries filled Wisma Subud. It was the largest international gathering held in Indonesia up until that time and was opened by the President of Indonesia. Visitors were in the compound in a village of temporary bamboo structures in traditional Indonesian longhouse style. The Congress was a vivid expression of the internationalism of Subud and a watershed event. The moment, according to Bapak, when Subud, which had hitherto been hidden from the world, became visible. Bapak outlined the administrative and organisational institutions which would provide the framework for Subud in the future. He placed new emphasis on the importance of enterprises and recommended the establishment of a bank to finance enterprise development. Bank SICA Bakti was established in Jakarta with funds of about $1.5 million collected from Subud members. A loan from the bank was used to purchase a prime piece of real estate in Jakarta's rapidly developing business district, and work began on a 14-storey office block, which was to be known as the SICA Centre, a project initiated by Bapak himself. Towards the end of the 70s, Bapak encouraged the establishment of another major project in England, to which he later gave the name Anugraha, meaning the unexpected grace of God. A Victorian mansion was purchased near Windsor Great Park, and work began to convert it into a hotel and conference centre. It was intended to combine a traditional English atmosphere with state-of-the-art technologies for events such as product launches. In 1980, the SICA Centre was completed at a cost of $14 million. Bank SICA Bakti was located here, and prestigious clients included the British Council. Now Bapak said that Subud should build a 5-star hotel, and a choice site was purchased for this purpose in downtown Jakarta. Around the same time, projects inspired by Bapak's example were being developed in other parts of the world. In Sydney, for example, Project Sunrise aimed to redevelop Darling Harbour, a derelict docklands area near the centre of the city. Bapak also initiated what was perhaps the most ambitious project of all. Since his first visits to the West in the 1950s, he had spoken of the potential of Kalimantan, the Indonesian part of the island of Borneo, with its mineral riches and other natural resources. In 1980, he went to central Kalimantan himself, opening the way for Subud's involvement. he obtained concessions in mining and agriculture, and a complete township was planned on land near Palangkaraya, the capital of central Kalimantan. Kalimantan was to be a place where Subud could establish itself and really make an impact on the world through the development of the province's natural resources. It was also to be an experiment in development with social values, working in close cooperation with the local Dayak people. At one point, Bapak put his thumb on a map of Kalimantan, saying that this would be where gold would be found. And mineral exploration in this vast, remote, and mountainous area did indicate the presence of gold and other minerals. In 1983, the 7th World Congress was held at Anugraha. Although the renovation of the building was not quite complete, the Anugraha Congress was an optimistic moment for Subud. The 12 years since the Juanda Congress had seen Subud activity on an unprecedented scale. The future seemed to hold great promise. It looked like Subud really had the capacity to make an impact on the world, not by propaganda or preaching, but by the example of its accomplishments. But, as it turned out, the Anugraha Congress was the high point of Subud's hopes for the major projects. Burdened by bad debt, the bank had to be sold. The hotel project did not go ahead, and the land was sold. Project Sunrise in Sydney was wound up. Possibly the most crushing blow of all was the loss of Anugraha. The building was completed in 1984, but was burdened by more debt incurred in the construction phase than could be serviced by its operating revenues. Nor did the projects in Kalimantan go ahead as planned, with the exception of the mining, which was carried forward on a shoestring budget by a handful of dedicated enthusiasts. By the end of the 80s, the only major project which remained in Subud hands was the Sriwijaya Centre. Many Subud members were profoundly depressed by these failures. However, most were able to accept them as a learning experience, an inevitable stage of Subud's development, and move on. An encouraging sign in the midst of the despondency about the major projects was the development of Subud welfare projects, following Bapak's advice that it is essential for us to undertake social activities.
In the Subud Brotherhood, through our spiritual experience, we have understood that there are two dimensions to charity. One is the outer dimension, which is doing charity. The other is the inner dimension of being charitable. The distinction is that when one is being charitable, one does not patronize the people one is trying to help. Instead, it is a sense of brotherhood, of people trying to share each other's understanding and suffering.
There was a particularly strong development in Jakarta, where the combination of Indonesian and expatriate enthusiasm centered on Wisma Subud led to the setting up of a charitable foundation, Yayasan Usaha Mulia, or YUM. The projects began with providing housing and vocational training to homeless boys in Jakarta. There was a medical clinic and a hospital. In the mountains, there was a tuberculosis clinic. A feature of the Subud approach is how social welfare, enterprise and culture are blended together. Subud humanitarian projects have an enterprising attitude. Subud enterprises often have a social welfare component or aspect. There were also welfare projects in other countries, such as Wisma Mulia, a home for elderly people in England. Susila Dharma International is the wing or affiliate of the Subud organisation which coordinates social projects. It seeks to bring harmony, order and balance into the lives of marginalised people through local initiatives. It works from a philosophy based on spirituality, respect and caring. Susila Dharma currently supports 68 projects in 26 countries. there are projects in medicine and health, education and youth, family support, community development, and humanitarian relief. Cecilia Dharma is registered in the USA as a non-profit charitable organisation and has consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council and UNICEF. It is all a way of putting into practice Bapak's observation that social and humanitarian work is a sign of the compassion of people towards other people. It is a sign of the link between one soul and another. While most of the major projects may have collapsed, many Subud members have started their own enterprises. There has been a restoration of confidence in the enterprise ideal, and SES, Subud Enterprise Services, is the wing of the organisation which assists their development. Not all these businesses have been successful, of course, but there have been some remarkable achievements. One of these success stories is the enterprise called Connolly Temple, set up by Bradford Temple and Ruckman Connolly, which operated in the pension business in the city of Wollongong, south of Sydney.
If we look at Bapa's talk since 1971, other than the words Latihan and God, probably the most frequently used word is the word enterprise. There was Bapa, smoked a big cigar, gold mines, banks, what traditionally spiritual movements and religion will regard as the antithesis of spirituality. And so the Latihan itself is a very radically new thing. But if we can do the Latihan and do those things, our potential to make an impact on the world is indeed very, very large.
The enterprise began in the early 80s in the spare bedroom of Ruckman's house. Then it moved to the garage under Bradford's house. A couple of years later, the partners purchased a house in the nearby township of Dapto and moved the business there. Finally, they bought their own building in Wollongong. By the time the partners retired from the business, a little more than 10 years after they had started it, it had grown from literally nothing to a significant Australia-wide financial institution, employing more than 100 people and with $1.2 billion of funds under management. At the Anugerah Congress, SICA, the Subud International Cultural Association, had been set up.
So we are quite happy because it will become probably a big group of friends all over the world, and why should we use all these talents and make wonderful things?
SICA supports cultural activities and helps Subud members develop their talents. Initially it had an emphasis on the arts, but in recent years it has broadened its focus. Now SICA addresses the whole field of human culture, not only the arts, but other fields of endeavour such as education and development. Subud includes within it people of all nationalities, races and religions, and Subud gatherings are lively and diverse expressions of many cultures. Difference is seen not as a source of conflict, but as something to be celebrated. In 1974, Bapak married for the third time to Ibu Mastuti. She is seen here with Bapak at his birthday celebrations in Wendhausen in Germany in 1976. In 1979, Bapak had a heart attack, and in 1983, surgery to remove a cataract. But during this time, he continued to be very active, travelling, giving talks, and nurturing Subud's development. His last overseas journey was in 1985, when he went to England, primarily for medical reasons. He was now frail and often in ill health. By the 1980s, Cilandak was no longer a quiet, rural backwater. It was now part of suburban Jakarta, and the road which ran past the compound carried heavy traffic and was noisy and polluted. In February 1987, Bapak moved further out to Pemalang, where a new house had been built for him. On June the 22nd, 1987, a birthday party was held for Bapak in his new house. It was attended by many Indonesians as well as visitors from overseas. Bapak appeared briefly to stand at the top of the main staircase to complete the Javanese custom of cutting the summit of a rice mountain. The guests sang the English and Indonesian birthday songs over and over again. Many sensed something special in the air. Bapak acknowledged their greetings and returned to his bedroom. In the early hours of the following morning, Bapak died while being taken to hospital. He was first laid to rest in the Karet Cemetery in Jakarta. In December 1993, Bapak, along with 6 members of his family, including his mother and his second wife, Ibu Siti Sumari, were disinterred from the Karet Cemetery and reburied on December the 28th at Sukamulia on a hilltop in the mountain region of Cipanas. Bapak had said that it would be nice to be in the hills at Sukamulia because it is cooler, pleasant, and more peaceful for visitors, particularly those who come from overseas.
I was lucky because I was alone on his grave, and usually there's it's like a pilgrimage, hundreds of people going there. And I sat near his grave and I started to pray, and suddenly I started to burst out crying, crying. And it was just, I suddenly felt I was his daughter. I was home. I had a family. I was recognized for who I was, and I felt the love he had for me and the love I had for him that I was not even aware of.
Since Bapak's death, Subud has continued as a stable and unified body. There have been none of the conflicts and divisions which sometimes follow after the death of a spiritual leader. Bapak often said that no other individual would take over his role after his death, but that Subud would be governed by a council representing the spiritual and material sides of its development. This is indeed what has happened. Subud's affairs are guided by the meetings of delegates from the various countries at the World Congress, and between congresses by the World Subud Council, which includes representatives from the various geographical zones such as Europe, Asia, and the Americas. In 1989, the 8th World Congress was held in Sydney. It was important as the first Congress without Bapak. Bapak's elder daughter, Ibu Siti Rahayu, began to assume some of the responsibilities which he had carried out during his lifetime. In Sydney, she gave talks, as Bapak had done, and Subud members began to look to her for advice. But she is always careful to emphasize that she does not replace Bapak. A considerable effort has gone into preserving Bapak's legacy in the Subud archives. Another important project has been the writing of a very detailed history of Subud by Harlina Longcroft. A feature of Subud life as we moved into the 90s was the decentralization of Subud away from Europe, the USA, and other First World countries. This was symbolized by the fact that the 9th World Congress was held in Colombia in Latin America in 1993 in Subud's own premises, the Amanacea Center. Subud began to grow in Eastern European countries such as Russia and the Ukraine, as the collapse of the Soviet Union provided people with an opportunity to explore their spirituality. Subud also began to grow in Africa, in areas such as the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where Subud houses and educational and welfare projects were established. The international helpers who travelled to various countries to give spiritual support to the membership have been particularly important in the development of Subud in these new areas. The Muhammad Subu Foundation, set up to honour Bapak's name, receives bequests and uses the money to support Subud projects all around the world. A priority has been helping local communities to build Subud houses, particularly in developing countries. Private foundations, such as the Grand Hermes Foundation for Peace, also support Subud projects for youth, culture, education and social welfare. The 10th World Congress was held in Spokane, Washington State, in the USA in 1997. It was attended by more than 3,000 participants from 52 countries on all 5 continents. It was more open to the public than any previous Congress. The future of any organisation depends, of course, on its young people. An encouraging sign in Subud is that many children of Subud parents are themselves joining Subud. All around the world, young Subud members are involved in lively activities. Their presence is strongly felt at Subud congresses, such as here at Spokane, and the Subud Youth Association, which was set up at the Anugraha Congress in 1983, continues to give them support and to promote their activities. Another most encouraging development is that in recent years, a core of dedicated members has sought to revive Bapak's vision in Kalimantan. A particular focus is Rungansari, the Subud housing community near Palangkaraya in central Kalimantan. A number of Subud members, including Ibu Rahayu, have shown their faith in Bapak's plan by building houses here. Its facilities include a business and conference centre, and it can become a base for Subud's development in central Kalimantan. There is also an eco-village with particular appeal to young people. The mining venture has persevered in exploration on its leases to prove the existence of commercial quantities of gold, copper and other minerals.
Looking at our first core.
It has also been recognised as an outstanding example of sustainable development, proceeding in an environmentally and socially responsible way, which has included the setting up of a foundation to assist the local Dayak population. June the 22nd, 2001, was the centenary of Bapak's birth. Subud members first celebrated this event in Jakarta. Then the focus of attention moved to Bali, where the 11th World Congress, attended by about 1,500 people, was held in July. After the Congress, many Subud members went on to Kalimantan, where Ibu Rahayu opened the Muhammad Subu Centre at Rungansari, symbolising Bapak's presence in Kalimantan. Few Subud members would say that Subud has yet fulfilled its potential. Few would say that the Subud organisation yet functions as dynamically or efficiently as it should. Most would acknowledge there have been many mistakes and lost opportunities. Nevertheless, in the 100th year after Bapak's birth, we can feel that Subud is firmly established in the world. It exists in 80 countries with about 15,000 active members. Many of those will testify that they have benefited from the Latihan. There have been outstanding achievements that indicate Subud's potential in enterprise, culture, and social and humanitarian projects, often with very innovative approaches. It seems, as Bapak hoped, that a foundation has been created from which Subud can now reach out to share what it has to offer with all of mankind.